Hi there. Well, I just put a couple of events up on Facebook this morning. One of them is the Plant Spirit Medicine Winter Retreat, which is the last weekend in January. People are familiar with those, been doing those for some time now. And then the week after that, the 3rd to the 6th of February, I've got an event, and this is the very first event I'm doing to train people to become Universal Soul Retrieval practitioners. I'm going to have a maximum of 6 participants on this event, and it's going to be hosted rather close to this stove, in fact, so this is the venue for that particular event. And it's a culmination of something that means a great deal to me, which is actually taking what I do out to those who very much want to learn how to do it, so that they can train, and then to give them all the extra information they need to know how to actually practice this particular form of healing. The rubber band effect and resistance. It's a curious thing that if you know there's something you need to do and you just don't do it, and that situation persists for any length of time, then you're in a place of resistance. So someone says vegetables are good for you and you just don't want to eat vegetables, and the time goes by and you're not eating the vegetables, and you have this knowing that it'd be good for you to eat them, you don't eat them, then classic case of resistance, and that resistance builds up. And so how this links into the rubber band effect is, if you can imagine a rubber band and you pull the rubber band back, the further you pull it, then the more actual tension is in that band, and if you pull it a really long way, that the rubber band is still whole, it hasn't actually broken, it's absolutely full of tension. Well, this is rather the same as when the person is resisting something that they know that they need to do. So the conventional wisdom would say don't resist anything, but what I'm suggesting to you is that there's a great power in the rubber band effect, which is that the more you have this resistance going on, when you finally let go of the resistance, just like the rubber band, off it goes to the other side of the room, it smacks against the wall. And this is something that's a very helpful thing to be aware of, that when we get resistances to things, it can actually be really quite useful to allow that resistance to take place and just feel how you feel about it. And you just don't want to do it, then just don't do it, and allow that to build up until eventually it catapults you into the very thing that you've been resisting all the time. All the time that you're building up the resistance to something, that effectively is potential energy which is being increased and stored. If it's still got the rubber band, it's being stored in the rubber band. If it's you, it's being stored in you. So energy is building up and building up and building up. Another classic example of a person goes through a period of sexual abstinence, and that is building up, building up, building up, and finally they're propelled out into the social world and they meet someone, they get together with that person, same kind of thing. So once the rubber band is let go of, once a person starts going out, once a person starts eating the vegetables, whatever it might happen to be, that's when that potential energy is actually released into action, which is what they call kinetic energy. So the idea of these periods of resistance building up enables us to move to a point where we move into action mode. So it's all about accepting where you are. So if you feel like you don't want to do anything, hey, accept you don't want to do anything. If you feel like you want to be lazy, great thing to do, because that means that you are allowing that potential energy to build up and build up and build up until the point you're propelled out into the outside world. Classic case I've noticed in my life, sometimes I just don't want to be cleaning things, I just want to lie about and not do anything for a bit, and then eventually I just notice I'm cleaning, hey, where did that come from? Right, the whole place is clean, just had to do it. It's that same effect of the rubber band, just building up the resistance, building up the potential energy, then allowing it to transform into kinetic energy through action. Another one that's perhaps the best example of all is when a person goes through a period of depression. Depression is the ultimate rubber band gradually, slowly, steadily being extended, and the longer this period of depression goes on, the worse it feels for that person. It feels like not getting anywhere, it just feels awful, which is why depression is called depression. And then at some point something's going to happen, and in the case of depression it may not even be something that person does, it could be an outside influence, it could be someone banging on the door and saying, "You're coming out tonight, I'm not having a no for an answer." Next thing you know, they're being dragged off and having a great time, and they've forgotten what the word even is. If they've reached that critical point where they're ready to let go of the extended rubber band. Now if they haven't got to that point, then the person can knock on the door and plead and beg as much as they like, and they'll be given the no. So in a sense, it's all about accepting where you are, learning where you are. And this is perhaps a big issue that we're all facing. We've all been brought up by parents, other people, teachers, social workers, whoever, relatives, and these people have done their best to give us their view of how to live our lives. And of course they are not us, they never could be, therefore they don't really understand us, how could they? And so that's what we call the conditioning. So we've all had this conditioning, which is should, must, have to, ought to, and all the rest of it. And then along comes you, and you've had all that through your childhood, maybe even through your adulthood. Oh, you should do this, you should do that, and finally you reach the point where you start to awaken to who you really are. And it's at that moment of starting to awaken to who you really are that you start to become in tune with, well, just what is it that I resist, what is it that I want to do, what is it I don't want to do. And this rubber band effect can be a very useful way to understand how you're getting on in your process of awakening and realising just what's going on for yourself. So actually you think to yourself, well, at the moment I just don't want to go out, so I'm just not going to go out, I'm just going to be on my own, I'm going to be quiet, and I'm going to be inward, and that's that. And if people don't hear from me, that's okay, it's not a big problem. And you can see how the conditioning could get in there at that moment, couldn't you? Because you could say the conditioning could start having this little voice saying, well, you shouldn't really be neglecting people, you should be helpful, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. And you can see where that goes, and that all takes a person away from who they really are, back to the conditioned model that they have been possibly trying to live according to ever since they were little kids. In so many ways, so many of the problems of the world are to do with people not being themselves. And if a person is not themselves for a really long period of time, then they can actually so forget who they are and what they really are here to do that they have absolutely no clue whatsoever. And the next thing you know, they're just literally following somebody else's script, and you get people who do this, and they give their lives doing things which actually mean nothing to them, and they have jobs which they hate, and people and family members who they don't relate to, and their whole life is a complete nightmare. And this is unfortunately so very common. Of a person who is stuck within the conditioning, then the first chinks and cracks start to show in the picture, and they start to get some kind of an idea of who they are. And when they do, one of the first most likely things that's going to happen, you can imagine that rubber band's been pulled back all those years of resisting who they really are, whoosh, off it goes, and the next thing you know, oh, that person is so selfish, oh, that person just seems to be doing what they want to do. They don't seem to be too bothered about their family and friends. Well, hey, maybe that's actually the whole point. Maybe that's part of the waking up process, is to realise what it is that they want in life and what it is that they're good at doing, what they love to do. And totally unsurprising, it's things we love to do that we're best at doing. So this is really taking the rubber band effect all the way in terms of that pull, because it literally could be the difference between living somebody else's life and living your own. And it's just helpful to realise that these apparently difficult periods are all preparations for us to change our potential stored energy into kinetic action, and then we can totally surprise the people around us, and they think, I never knew that person had it in them, look, well, they're up to these days, they're having a great time, you see how many more friends they got and what a different life they seem to have. Good grief, yeah, really enviable. And the next thing you know, the people who are stuck in their conditioning and looking at these free enlightened souls are having a great time, thinking, well, that's a better way to be. He used to be a bit of a miserable old so-and-so before when he was doing things he didn't want to do, and look at him now, he's having a great time. Maybe I'll take a leaf out of his book. So that effectively is the awakening process that's going on worldwide at the moment. And here we are, 2012, so close, so very, very close. So this is really essential stuff for everyone to be aware of. And in terms of the global situation, there's a planet which has been suffering millennia of oppression. People have been oppressed for thousands of years in so many different ways, through so many different systems of control within nations, within tribes, within these super nations which are starting to emerge. And it's all to do with developing such a massive potential energy, so that when we as a collective human race reach the point where we say, actually, that's it, we know what we want, we know how we need to live, and nothing's going to stop us. So that's where we're moving inexorably towards, the nothing's going to stop us. If you take this to the broader picture and look at things politically, then this is actually what's been going on worldwide. And you can go all the way back to the fact that we had 40, 50, 60 years of communism in the USSR, and then it just collapsed and action produced something completely different. Had the same thing with South Africa years ago, and now we're having exactly the same thing happening here in 2011 with different countries who've put up with tyrannical regimes, sometimes for decades, suddenly saying enough's enough, that's it, we've had it. So this is a bit of a controversial thing, but it means to say that if you're in a country which has experienced dictatorship for decades, or in a relationship that's experienced decades or years worth of dictatorship, of being forced to be who you don't want to be, having been controlled all this length of time, then here's the other way to look at it. The rubber band effect says that you've simply been storing up all that potential energy, which has been increasing and increasing and increasing, until finally the next thing you know, if it's a country, the people are on the streets. If it's a relationship, the person who's just taken it for all those years is suddenly doing the thing of the worm turning and saying, well, actually this is the deal. If you want to carry on living with me, you better realise I'm this, I'm this, I'm this, and this is happening, and I'm not doing that anymore. So we are living very much in that kind of time. It's also a time of the truth without, things which have been concealed and hidden away. I mean, the classic one is certain rather large religions having issues about sexual abuse and such like becoming worldwide mainstream information, having had it hidden away for decades and decades. These are all the times that we're living in, the times where things are coming out into the open. Having spent so long with freedom and love being so severely curtailed in our lives, it's just going to produce such an incredible groundswell of determination that people are going to have the life that they want to live, and they're going to do the things that they love, and they're going to be with the people that they love. Yeah. The idea that the souls that have come to be born as children in this particular time, in this time, one of the most incredibly extraordinary times in the entire history of the world, they are so full of energy. That is so true, unless they're severely drugged by products which are given to them by their parents via the medical system. Otherwise, they're virtually on fire with their ideas, and that's why various rather unfortunate terminologies start existing, like ADHD and so on, which just means, hey, the child is so full of life, we don't know how to handle this child. It's rather ironic, that. So, yeah.
So why? So that didn't appear on camera. Why are they like this? What kind of?
Okay, so what I'm saying really is that the reason why these children come into the world with such incredible energy and dynamism is because they have literally held themselves back for we don't know how long, thousands of years, even long, until they get a chance to incarnate as a physical human being. And boy, didn't they choose their time just perfectly. They wanted to be in at the most significant piece of action in the entire history of this planet, which is happening at the moment. And the thing is, it's so extraordinary and so powerful that it's very hard for us on a day-to-day level to be realising that, because I've known some people, including myself, thinking, well, all this talk about collapsing of the banking system and collapse of the this, that and the other, and it doesn't seem to be happening and things are still going on. Well, what you've got to remember is that this is a really big cataclysmic thing happening, and you can't expect it to happen in 5 seconds, or even 5 minutes, or even 5 months. We are in a process which is taking time, so it's not so obvious to us living here on the ground face of life, but actually it's utterly cataclysmic what's going on, and these children have just got so much energy because they have literally stored all that energy up in terms of really desire and wanting to be physical beings. And finally they get their wish, they get to be the lottery winners, they get to be the jackpot winners, and they're here and they're absolutely full of themselves, and so rightly too. And what we're going to be finding more and more of is very young children guiding older ones into how to be. Quite a confrontational generation, that's what we're getting, and hey, that's exactly the strong medicine we need as a human race. Children that won't put up with any nonsense.